Hello and welcome to the Pre-Chiro podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ben Glass, and today we're making a professional chiropractor connection out in Canada, I believe, with Dr. Ed Osburn. Dr. Ed, can you get us started by just reflecting on that time in life where you decided you wanted to become a chiropractor and what it was that attracted you to this path?
Okay, well, I got attracted to becoming a chiropractor because of a girl. So not the typical story where it's like, hey, chiropractic saved my life. All that came later. But no, I started dating, my first soon to be or was my first wife, and the her family was all chiropractors, and I fell in love with the fact that, the philosophy, the art. I loved everything about it. I mean, I guess it's like chiropractic chose me in that sense. Yeah. That's my crazy story for how I got into this.
Can you kind of just reflect on the background, the upbringing that you had, some of the different identities that you carried with you at the time? Were you an athlete? Were you a woodworker? What was your background? And maybe just try and connect that to how it helped you in that path that you embarked upon.
I think, like a lot of people, maybe because our audience is going to be students, if not, early grads or people who have recently graduated from chiropractic, but probably not unlike a lot of them. I was just basically, I think I was renting cars. I was like the manager at a Hertz car rental at the airport in Ottawa, Canada. And, I just started really looking at holistic living. I started looking at, very clean diet. I think I wanted to looked at becoming a natural path at some point. And then the next thing I know, here it is. I made this decision. Okay, I'm going to follow this path to become a chiropractor, which meant, and at the time I didn't even have an undergrad degree. So I had to go back and go through my undergrad degree, moved to the States, which was a huge move to go from Toronto, Canada, all the way to California. And I was there for 6 years, but I did my undergrad and my postgrad there. So chiropractic college, all the while, working in admin in the college, and then in the cadaver lab. I worked my entire time, worked a couple jobs through school. It was a lot. It was a lot to go through and I was and probably like a lot of people who are listening, I was just completely relentless. Like it was like I am driven to become a chiropractor. So it was quite an experience.
Can you talk about what you gravitated towards, maybe some mentors that you had? What really shaped your experience? Because ultimately we have a couple of things that are highlights or stick out in our mind.
Yeah. There was, oh gosh. So Guy Duran, maybe some people know of Dr. Guy Duran. He passed away from prostate cancer a number of years ago, but he became a very good friend when I moved to California, and a very big influence too in how I wanted to practice. And that was the first exposure I had to the true philosophy of chiropractic. What a wonderful man! His energy. He actually married. He married myself and my wife on the beach. He was a very good friend, and we named my second child after him. And so he was a massive influence, and I always wanted to emulate how he practiced, because every time I was in his practice, it was like, oh my God, this is exactly how I would want it to be. And he also did network. He was a network practitioner. And, I would say Guy, but also Reggie Gold was a massive influence. When I was in my first year, I coordinated a seminar, and I actually called Reggie. I don't know how I got his number, but I called Reggie, picked up the phone, and I paid for his plane ticket to come out to Life Chiropractic College. That was when it was in the old campus, in the old we were in these like old modules in this like little used to be a public school there. And he flew out and for a Saturday. We had about 15 people from my class, they're students, and he taught us technique. So it was quite an experience to be able to sit down and have sushi with Reggie Gold, who is, a legend in the profession, and then also to be adjusted by Reggie, but also to get instruction on how to adjust. It was our first real experience as technique, in terms of the technique and the art of chiropractic. So it was pretty cool. I would encourage anyone who is listening that's a student, make sure that you learn from some of these people who have been doing it for 30, 40 years, because they have like the legacy that is in their hands that they can, and the things that they can show you and guide you in is just incredible. It was an incredible experience.
Yeah, and that's why I asked you about your mentors, because our lineage really has an impact on who we become after school, and just the things that we remember about school. Can you maybe just speak as the guidance counselor? Actually, you know what? Before we even get there, just introduce yourself, share with people a little bit about the contributions that you've made in recent years, where your passion is, where your heart has been in bringing forth things like the Chiropractic Philanthropist podcast, like the concept of a chiropreneur, and just what you're up to today. And if you could just introduce yourself.
Yeah. So, where do I start? So what you have a little bit of the background, right? So trained, educated in California. I ended up back in Alberta, Canada, where I am now. I'm in Calgary right now, but I was in a smaller bedroom community, and I practiced there with my ex-wife now. We had a very, very robust family pediatric practice, very, very busy, and I was a warrior for the profession. When they wanted to bring in prescription rights, when they wanted to remove subluxation, I fought, and in some ways that was like not good, because we always had kind of like a target on our back. But I feel, like as a chiropractor, I was always a warrior, and I stood for something. I stood my ground. And whether you like me or you didn't like me, at least people respected me because I had an opinion. And I think that's something that a lot of us, we need to, like chiropractors, especially early on, is have an opinion, because it is respected, right? Don't waffle. Like, it's important for us to stand your ground, whether I agree with you or don't agree with you, that's fine. So 14 years. And then I was diagnosed with a severe chronic autoimmune condition. So I was diagnosed with Crohn's. It was very unexpected. I was 39 years old. And things got it escalated very quickly after that. I was an ultramarathon runner, and just my life, everything changed, surgeries, all of that. And I couldn't practice at the same capacity. And when I couldn't practice anymore, I lost my sense of identity. I didn't know who I was anymore, because everything I did, I lived, I bled chiropractic. I dreamed about chiropractic when I slept at night. And so I created this crazy podcast called The Chiropractic Philanthropist, because I wanted to actually just simply be part of the community, right? So sitting in my basement, this was back in 2014, right, Ben? Can you believe it? 2014. And yeah, I started having these conversations with chiropractors. And I remember it was so bad, because I was like apologizing to people, like going, "Oh my God, this is so bad. I'm so sorry." And 400 of them later, it got better. And it was really just a legacy project. I love it's just simply like yourself. Imagine the conversations, if you could go back, and we can go back and listen to those conversations, and how those people have changed over since 2014. We're all different people. I'm a different person. So I was so naive back then. So that was really it was about giving back. It was about having the profession not feel so isolated, right? And then from there, people started asking, doctors were asking me like, "Hey, how do you do this podcasting thing?" Like, and I created a course. And it was the first successful online digital marketing course that I created. And it was on how to podcast. And we still have that course. People that onboard can still get that. And then it was like, how do you do strategic launching of courses? And that's kind of where I am now. Is I won't say like the names, but there's a lot of people who are heavy hitters in our profession or in the healthcare profession. And like I'm their marketing strategist in our team, and we build everything for them. And I feel that, I'm still part of the profession, even though I don't use my hands to help people anymore. I feel like I am helping so many people, practices, doctors, people, communities, the world, because of what I do, even if I'm not in my practice anymore. It's a long story.
No. It's very relevant because it builds context for this conversation. And usually I start off with that, and I realized we just jumped right in, and you gave me a really short answer on like why you decided to become a chiropractor. And usually like pretty like extensive segment to this conversation is like, were you an athlete? Were you working? You were like, no, I was following somebody else into, this amazing adventure we call becoming a chiropractor. Yeah. So given your understanding of basically just how to communicate in today's society, in today's world, and actually reach people, what advice, so just to give you some context of the person you're talking to in this answer right here is a student who has a foundation of chiropractic, have experienced it, they've observed it, they've been in offices, they've read some of what it is and why people go and become chiropractors, and they've decided they wanted to start their own pre-chiro club on their college campus or their high school campus. Can you maybe just give some words of support or encouragement or some guidance as to how they can be effective leaders, or how they can structure their club within that environment to really reach the people that they're trying to attract?
So let's be clear here. Like, I mean, if it was myself and I was in chiropractic college and I was a student and I wanted to have a club that was going to be the most popular club, right, on campus, what would I do? Is that kind of the question? Okay. So I know exactly what I would do. I would make it fun. I would make it educational and entertaining, be completely outside the cube. Like, don't do another club like everyone else does. Make it fun and make it so that other students want to show up and they're going to get a ton of value out of being part of the group. I would also bring in people that they're not going to hear, like with experiences. So chiropractors, doctors, could be people who use chiropractic, maybe like, athletes in your community, and bring them in and have them as speakers, because these are the people that you're not going to get exposure to from your school, right? Like most of the education you get in school is going to be pretty formal. I feel like, bringing in those speakers, like, again, like I said, like when I was in chiropractic college, it was like Reggie Gold, Joe Strauss, like I brought in and helped bring in all of these people, because I felt like, this was what we were devoid of when I was going through school, is the philosophy, but also these people who had such a depth of knowledge of chiropractic and the experience. Like, it was like, even if they don't appreciate it now, 20 years from now, when they're in practice, they will look back and they will go, oh my God, I can't believe I got to hear Joe speak, in a room with 30 other people. Right. So that's what I would do, is I would make it very eclectic, like bring in an eclectic group of speakers. I would have a club that is essentially, the legacy club, like bring in the old school chiros, listen to them.
How would you unpack the chiropractic philanthropist? You said there was 400 interviews. If I'm a chiropractic student and I wanted to structure or orient myself to that podcast and really understand how it's laid out or how it's structured or how I can quickly find specific types of interviews or specific types of people that you interviewed, can you kind of just give us an understanding, just if a student's taking that next step?
Yeah, so it's pretty easy, actually. Most listeners are going to be able to either go to Spotify right now, or they could go to iTunes, and iTunes would probably be the one I'm more familiar with, and just understand Spotify. A lot of people believe like iTunes or they feel like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, that those are, audio, like places to go and listen and consume audio when really there are search engines. So when you head there, just go with intention of like, okay, what do I want to find? And go to the search bar and just search. So chiropractic, hyphen whatever, like whatever topic, subluxation, chiropractic, finances, chiropractic, ROFs, chiropractic. So every episode that is on iTunes that has those key terms, they'll be able to, that will be viewed and they can start to listen to those. So it could be my podcast, but there's a lot of podcasts out there. There's a ton of chiropractic podcasts out there now, which is really actually kind of cool. But so yeah, so it's basically go in, search whatever topic you're looking for. If it's a person, if it's a subluxation, if it's science related, you'll find it. It'll pop up.
Awesome. And any guidance or sort of giving some details as to how they can start to build an identity or a brand online, or how they can start to ask themselves the important questions that help them align with their true message or their personal sort of passion and interests, where that all intersects with how you put it into a package that is consumable or that is shareable or is inviting people to connect with you?
Well, I think, if I was coming out of chiropractic college, like early, in practice, and I was looking at marketing, I would market my persona versus market my practice, if that makes sense. So, even in what we do with digital marketing for like digital marketing products and things like that, or coaching or consulting management, usually we focus on persona based until the people hit like a, 7-figure business. And then we can focus to something that's more branded or business based. But early on, people who you are going to be loyal to you and are going to invest with you, well, they have a lot of options. So the reason they're going to invest in you is not necessarily because of the name of your clinic. It's going to be who you are. So my advice would be, get really clear on your values, get really clear on who you are and what you stand for, educate and entertain people, whether it be on social media, create a podcast, be omnipresent, like be on TikTok, be on IG Reels, be on Facebook, although most of the young kids don't want to do Facebook these days, but it is still a player, be everywhere, create content that's valuable, that also expresses to people who you are as a person. And that's generally where they'll make a decision to, recruit you as their chiropractor. It'll be personality based. People invest in people, especially when it comes to healthcare, I believe.
Awesome. And then just as far as being a chiropractor in the real world, can you just share or shine a light on that family practice that you had? Just give some insights as you remember it and as you would describe it, if you were describing it to a high school student or to a college student, to help build context for what life is like as a chiropractor.
Yeah. I mean, so as I reflect, like the first couple of years were really hard. I mean, some people might have said, like, would say, oh, you were actually doing really well the first couple of years, but it was really hard, like building out and starting a practice from scratch. And it wasn't until we actually had someone who was a coach and a management team help us that we actually started to really take off, because we didn't have the business acumen that was required to run a business. And that was what made things really, really difficult. So we weren't able to focus on helping people in the practice, or really, really get laser focused on care and the quality of care, versus we were so focused on, paying the rent and keeping the lights on and all of those things. So the investment in management, and I'm not going to pimp anyone here. I'm just going to say, get support. It will pay off, and always have support. Always have a community and support. So the first couple of years were really difficult. We got really laser focused on, we were family pediatric, the type of care. So how we did the correction, how we adjusted, how we located subluxation. We had a very solid system. And so, we use CLA technology for scanning and insight. We saw a lot of, like I said, a lot of kids. We saw a lot of families. We had a way of educating our patients that just, it worked and people connected, and we grew in the community very, very quickly for that reason. And it was because of subluxation, because it was such a simple concept, right? Even though some people are afraid to talk subluxation, I always talk subluxation, because it was, even when I had the conversation with medics, they were like, oh, well, that makes sense, because it does make sense. And I think that was the reason why we're so successful, because simple scales and subluxation is a simple concept. You know, if I could do, and I'll just throw this at you though, because we grew to a practice which, you know, very, very high volume. If I could do it differently, and if I was to go out the door right now and go get a space and start over, I would get 400 square feet. I would have 2 tables. I would have an exam room. I probably wouldn't even have, I would have Jane. I wouldn't even have a CA. And I would just, that's it. That's how I would practice. I probably wouldn't, I would keep it very, very simple this time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I often hear that you have to go through the complexity to really appreciate the simplicity. And I got that wisdom. Many people told us, hey, you can go out and you can have 4 associates and, you know, 4,000 square feet, and it's not worth the stress and the complexity that it adds to your weekly life. That's really interesting. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. Can you maybe just break down subluxation really simply, so that students can maybe take your explanation and basically just add it to their bank of ways to describe how chiropractic can be of value and service to people?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very simple concept. So as I mentioned, we would use CLA technology. We would do scans when people came in. We would do palpation, and we really just described that we would do the bone on nerve, right? So we would have the model, you know, bone out of place, pressure on nerve, depending on what, you know, fibers or what tracts are being affected, can affect any part of, you know, is controlled by that nerve specifically, right? So it could be motor, it could be autonomic. Either way, we know is, and based on scans, it's not necessarily, again, how you feel, but it's how you heal. And we would locate and correct. And it was really magical too, because people really understood that. Like they could see, and especially using inside, I'm going to give pimp Dave Fletcher here, but I mean, they could really, they could see when they were not, like when they were not progressing, right? Or when they were getting better. And it wasn't necessarily, because most people felt better after the first couple adjustments, right? But we could really monitor then on how they were progressing over the long run, right? With care. So it was bone on nerve, very simple pinched nerve concept. Some people are going to squawk about that, but you know what? It's simple. And you got to keep things simple. There's a lot of research out there that also shows the bone on nerve or subluxation based is very relevant too as well. So
Absolutely. What's your why today? Obviously, you've got a family, you've got kids. What is really driving you to want to work with people on marketing strategies? Like, why are you doing this in such a way that I believe has a pretty big vision behind it? So can you maybe just kind of share a little bit of what your company is sort of moving in the direction of, or how you're helping clients of yours?
yeah, like, I mean, we're really getting more focused on education lately. Especially, we took a step back for about a year, and we really refined our systems in terms of helping our existing clients. We're very boutique. We're not looking to have 500 or 1,000 people in our communities or groups. So we took a step back for a year. We really refined that. We feel we have it down. We have, you know, 400 or 500 hours of learning and content, and we're really good at what we do in helping doctors who want to create a digital presence, but also income, right, and impact. And for that reason too, it allows me a lot of time now to do things like this, where I feel like, you know, we have to look forward as a profession. I think we're at a really critical point right now. You know, we had 2 years, you know, that were very historical for a lot of us, where a lot of chiropractors had a lot of like very difficult time. Some people killed it, but a lot of people felt it was really difficult. Enrollment is down from what I'm seeing in the stats. Enrollment's been down in colleges. People who are graduating is down. And then there's a lot of chiropractors in the next 10 to 15 years are going to be retiring. So I want, my mission right now is a legacy mission to help chiropractors step into becoming more modern, especially in their messaging, so that they can be more successful, but also so we can bring this profession to light, right? From out of, back into mainstream. Cause I feel like for the last, or for the previous, for like 15 years, we were really on a run where we were becoming more mainstream. And now it seems like we're kind of stalled out and hit a ceiling. And there's a lot of medics as well who are taking the chiropractic philosophy and they're using that, and they're hitting a home run. So I'm just finding, the next probably 5 years before I retire, I just want to help doctors become more successful at getting the message out to the world. And it's all going to be through digital presence, right? AI, digital presence. There's a lot of things going to change in the next 5 years.
Absolutely, I'm right there with you. I'm learning day by day on ChatGPT and some of these different technologies, and then you've got Canva, and being a creator, it seems like is such a simplified process. Some people really overcomplicate it, but as you said, if you start to share insights, so just to give you some tidbits on what I've observed, some patterns that I've observed that I'm trying to address with these types of conversations is that, pre-Chiro hashtag, less than 200 pre-Chiro bits of information, pre-med hashtag, over 1.5 million bits of information. There's schools now, high schools, that are being sponsored by hospitals, and
Wow.
they've invested in high school students to come. They say, whatever clinical setting you want to join us in, you just let us know. Whatever type of research projects you want to join us in, you just let us know, and you can be a fly on the wall. You can participate. They're creating more and more opportunities earlier and earlier in the lives and life cycles of these budding healthcare providers, of these people that are the educated populations of our world, shall we say. And so asking the question of, what does pre-Chiro look like? Why has pre-chiropractic never been fully focused on and invested in? What types of conversations can be had with the who's who in the profession, the people that actually care about the bigger vision of the profession, because they've either achieved a certain level of capacity where they can think beyond their own situation and think of solutions that our profession can provide in new and innovative ways. And that's where inviting people such as yourself onto this podcast I'm just sensing who's out there, who's really actively and proactively trying to contribute to our greater collective, the collective consciousness of our chiropractors, but also of our educational system. So I kind of just ask you, what do you think could be utilized within that population, this new population or this new outcropping of pre-chiropractic students, prospective students? They have more time. They still are not really fiscally responsible as much as, they will be thinking of themselves as an adult. Maybe they're 16, 17, 18, maybe they're 19 or 20, but I'm just curious what you think can happen if we have students asking new questions, or we're asking new questions of students in different times of their trajectory, shall we say.
It's a tough question, man. What would I suggest? I think the schools would have to get more involved in recruiting, the younger generation.
So just not to interrupt you, but just to say, traditionally, the school admissions departments are the driving force of what brings people to chiropractic. And there's never been a third party entity, a vehicle that has said, hey, I'm independent of the school. I honestly don't even care if you go to chiropractic school. I just want to put chiropractic in front of you, show how it can help you at this stage of your life, align with who you are, and find your best path. If that's becoming a chiropractor, that's your choice. Good for you. Let's support you on that path. But if it's not, at least you've learned what chiropractic is and have a new value for it, even if you go become something else.
Yeah, again, it's a tough one, man. I mean, honestly, like if it was me, so if we're talking about perspectively, like I can't even relate with a 20-year-old anymore. That's probably why it's so hard to answer.
What about a 50-year-old who's changing careers? They're looking for, okay, I've owned a tire shop. I've made a lot of money. I'm successful, but I'm lacking purpose right now. I
Yeah.
need to go and invest some years in developing my purpose so I could really help people.
Well, even if it's a 19-year-old or a 50-year-old, it would probably be the same answer for me, which would be um like getting them into a room of other people who are like-minded, who want to learn more about chiropractic, but don't give them just an information session. Give them hands-on. And this is probably not going to be like, endear me to a lot of chiropractors, because I know that what we do is a very specific, and you have to honor the adjustment, but get them palpating, get them like hands on, get them adjusted if they've never been adjusted. I mean, I had students when I went to school, they'd never been adjusted before, and they were in chiropractic college. And I would, because I feel like moving forward, it's all going to be about sensory. It's going to be about hands, it's about physical touch, it's about connection. Because again, if we go back to the AI discussion, if I was a medic, I'd be scared, right? Because soon people are going to be able to go to something that's like a chat GPT. They'll enter in their symptoms, and they're going to get a diagnosis, right? Just like they do when they go see their doctor. Now, maybe someone will come on live and confirm it, but either way, they're going to they possibly could become obsolete. But what will never be obsolete is chiropractic, like the adjustment, the hands-on piece of it. So that would be my answer: is get those 19-year-olds, get them 20-year-olds. I love that when I would go to like Arno Brunier's like events, and this is before we were doing technique in school, like in college. We were still just going through anatomy stuff, and we would do these large 30 students in a room, and we would palpate each other. We would start doing some real basic adjustments, and we would learn the philosophy. And I found those experiences were so valuable, and that's what really embedded me into I don't want to say the belief, but for lack of a better word, the belief in what we do as practitioners. And I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's the answer I would give: is have those experiences, whether it's for someone who's 19 or if 50. Put them in a room where they can actually start the physical experience of chiropractic.
Yeah, I think that a big barrier or friction point in my head is, do I invite college and high school students to start touching each other and the liability behind that? But if we're just practicing listening hands, if we're just listening with our hands, and maybe even not touching people that are laying face down, but literally just shaking hands, or literally just putting our hands on each other's shoulders or back, I think that you're onto something there, as far as making it more kinesthetic, giving people an experience that is out of the frame of reference of, I'm going to go become a healthcare provider. Most times people don't think about, I'm going to go touch people for a living. So thank
Yeah.
you for that.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, that really is what it's about, though. What we do as chiropractors, because I always felt as a doc, some of those people that you would meet, that week might be the only time someone actually even touches them, right? So and again, we're future pacing this, right? Give it 5 years from now, we are more connected than ever before, but we are also, in the same respect, more disconnected than ever before. And that physical piece is what's going to take our profession, make us what we do really, really extra special. It's the secret sauce. Yeah. Screw the liability, man.
I appreciate it. I mean, there's no chiropractors in college health centers. There's really no chiropractors talking with guidance counselors. And I don't think it's
Yeah.
ever going to really come from the schools or the chiropractors. It's going to come from the students that go to that school that say, hey, you're not representing the path that I'm on. This is my track, and it's not even being talked about with my fellow students. Can you help me
Yeah.
get my presence felt over here? This is a legitimate profession that I'm going to do. Yeah, very interesting. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I could keep prodding and trying to elicit or evoke some insights from you, but I think that you've done enough to just give a gist of where your heart is at and who you are and what you're about, and just allows me to connect people to you because you have created an ecosystem of information that supports students. And that's really what I was asking you earlier. You went into iTunes and Spotify, but really what I was asking you is like, you created 400 interviews. Like, how did you go about figuring out what kinds of interviews you were going to do? Like, what do students like need to know is available within your specific podcast? That's more. I was hoping you could give me like a little bit of an overview, and then drill down a little bit into detail as to the types of people you interviewed, what the interviews were about, what types of conversations you had.
Yeah, I mean, so every interview was the same format essentially, right? It was a very simple format of story, and we would begin with I always called it like a little warm up. I would get people chiropractors love to talk about themselves, so with the exception of this one. But yeah, I would just like, hey, tell us about you. And so every chiropractor out of every 400, I've never heard anyone tell the same story. I've never heard anyone have the exact same struggle, right? Because then we go into a struggle, like I call it, I won't swear on here, the crap sandwich. Tell me about a time you ate the crap sandwich. But most importantly, like what people learn from it, and then how they implement that in their lives. So it's like, what was the struggle? And then we talk about like something that's really cool that's going on in their life, something new, and they'll explain, hey, I have this new associate, or I'm launching a program that's doing this in our community. And then we would go into it. I would always put them in my TCP time machine and send them back to a younger version, which is really just like, what's the best advice you'd give yourself when you came out of chiropractic college? What do you know now that you wish you knew then? And then resources. I mean, someday we're going to put together a list of all the resources, books and podcasts and all these different recommendations that people have given. Those 400 recommendations, we'll put them into a list so people can opt in and just get those. But it's all story. It's really story driven though. It's not just facts. It's not research. It's not what's the latest study. It's like real life, real raw chiropractors sharing the difficult times and the joys and the magic that happens in their practice.
Amazing. And I would say this is about the 275th interview, and I would describe it very similarly to how you just described it. Instead of saying what would you give the advice to the person graduating, I would say before you go to chiropractic school, what would you give advice to? Just because I think that, yeah, I don't want to say that we've forgotten about pre-chiro students, but I think that we've just said, oh, schools will handle that, where the right people will be called to the profession, right? Chiropractic chooses you. Chiropractic doesn't, necessarily, I just feel like people are not going out and finding students that would make great chiropractors and just at least exposing them to it. That's kind of what we're doing here. Anyway. Appreciate you, Dr. Osburn. Appreciate you. Thank you for all your contributions. And the profession is definitely better off, and it will continue to reap the benefits. I think it'll continue to eat the fruits from the trees that you planted seeds back in 2014 and have allowed to kind of germinate. Anything interesting that you can kind of point students in the direction of to connect with you today? Any sort of final thoughts or final suggestions or final message to the students?
Well, I would just, there's two things. First is the Chiropractic Philanthropist podcast has actually been handed off. So I handed the football off about 4 weeks ago. So Dr. Kelly Polson has taken over. I kind of refer to it as like the Tonight Show. Johnny Carson has left the station, and Kelly's taken over. He's an amazing guy. So do tune into those podcasts. So that's like one of the new things that's happened. And I'm launching a new podcast called Bold Conversations. And this one's a little bit, it's not just going to be chiro interview specific, but it's going to be a little bit edgier. I'm going to actually express my opinions as well on that podcast. But I think a lot of your listeners could appreciate it too, because we will have some pretty prominent chiropractors with some very edgy opinions, we could say. So yeah, that's what's kind of new and what we're working on. If anyone wants to follow me on social media, I'm on Instagram, pretty easy to find, but also Facebook. So at Dr. Ed Osburn, Osburn, you can follow me there. And I post a ton of content, like free stuff all the time, like stuff that could help them, anyone who's, even in pre-chiro, maybe get a little bit more clarification on whether this is the profession for them or, define their values. I'm very lifestyle driven now. So business and everything fuels my values.